There was a point in time where the Baltimore Orioles were one of the better, more successful teams in baseball for several years. From the start of the 2012 season through the end of the 2016 season, the Orioles were the best team in the American League in wins and win percentage while being fourth in all of baseball. They made the playoffs in 2012, 2014, and then again in 2016, but it was this very moment that ended an era and began a new one that will forever be looked at as one of the most, if not the most, dreadful in Orioles history. If you're part of the 70% of viewers not subscribed yet and enjoy the content, make sure to hit that button and join the wonderful subscribers of the channel, as it was this very swing of the bat by Edwin Encarnacion, one that would send this very baseball into orbit, that ended the Orioles for a long time. In just 2 years' time, the Orioles had one of the worst seasons by any team of all time, finishing with just 47 wins, 115 losses, and ended the year 61 games back of the first place Boston Red Sox. 61 games out of first place, just 2 years after making the playoffs. Let that sink in. Manny Machado, gone. Adam Jones, gone. And those were two of the main pieces of the Orioles' offensive and defensive success over the years. The starting rotation and bullpen had been torn apart, and the team was of course just in full rebuild mode at this point. The Orioles were better in 2019 by 7 games, finishing 49 games back of the first place Yankees with 108 losses. But hey, I mean, progress. 2020 was 2020, and the Orioles were somehow not in last place by season's end. But again, it was 2020, so you gotta take a lot of what happened that year with a grain of salt. But by 2021, the O's were back at the bottom, 48 games back of the first place Rays with 110 losses. I mean, year after year after year at this point, the team continued to be awful, and it was hard to see an end in sight. But as the losses and terrible seasons of baseball continued to pile up, little positive things were happening behind the scenes, and those things also piled up. Thanks to the historically awful 2018 season, the Orioles were able to get some nice picks in the 2019 draft, including the first overall pick, where they'd take catcher Adley Rutschman out of Oregon State University, and with their second pick, they'd take Gunnar Henderson out of high school. After the 2019 season, the Orioles traded one of the last players left from the 2016 team, starting pitcher Dylan Bundy, to the Angels in exchange for 4 players, including a man named Kyle Bradish. Skip ahead a year, and the Orioles would pick up starting pitcher Tyler Wells out of the Rule 5 draft after the Minnesota Twins left him off their roster. In the midst of all the losing, yes, most of the play on the field was of course bad, really bad, but there were some bright spots like Cedric Mullins, who finished top 10 in MVP voting in 2021. With that said, it was still painful to be an Orioles fan or anyone associated with that organization, and it only continued to be that way to kick off 2022. The most anyone could really talk about regarding the Orioles to begin 2022 was the renovations they had made to Camden Yards, moving the left field wall back while also raising it, creating the Great Wall of Camden. The Orioles started off the 2022 season with a 16-24 record, with the obvious thought being, here we go again. But that's when the team made a decision, one that would kickstart a new era in Baltimore. The decision to call up the 2019 first overall draft pick, Adley Rutschman. From that point forward, the Orioles played like a winning team. Not enough to the point where they were playoff bound, but the Orioles started playing so well to the point where some thought they should buy at the trade deadline, but smartly they didn't and actually sold some players, including electric closer Jorge Lopez, trading him to the Twins for 4 players in return, including a reliever named Ynier Cano. So again, they didn't make the playoffs, but after starting with that 16-24 record from May 21st, Adley Rutschman's debut, all the way through the end of the season, the Orioles played to a 67-55 record, finishing the season with 83 wins and a 4th place finish, 31 games better than they were in 2021, and there were some real pieces starting to come together. Now that is progress. But then again, were they the best team in their division? Actually, the better question would be, were they even the second or third best team in their division? A lot of people, most people, including me, would have told you no before the 2023 season began. and those people, me included, would be dead wrong. The Tampa Bay Rays jumped out to an incredible start to the 2023 season, starting the year off 13-0, and continued to play really well through the end of June, and they were and basically have been the American League East team that everyone was talking about and gushing over. Deservingly so. I mean, they were firing on all cylinders, dominating the league, not spending a single day of the season out of first place up until that point. But ever since starting the season 57-28 through the first 3 months, the Rays' first place division lead has continued to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, and all of a sudden, they're no longer in first place. And that's because the Baltimore Orioles have taken over. This entire time, while the Rays were starting off hot, having these crazy runs, being in first place and getting most of the attention, the Orioles stayed steadily behind them in second place. I'd argue that the Orioles have been the most consistently good team in baseball this year. They've never really had a bad stretch so far. In fact, they've yet to be swept by a team in 2023. Here's another crazy fact that shows how much of an impact Adley Rutschman has had on this Orioles team. The Orioles haven't been swept since Adley has been on their roster, and that of course dates back to last year. Speaking of Adley Rutschman, he's one of the many Orioles having a fun time in 2023. He's walked almost as many times as he struck out, has a good OPS, and is fantastic as a catcher. The other 2019 draft pick who was taken after Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, he's been awesome too. Austin Hayes, who's been an Oriole since 2017, is having a really good year. Anthony Santander, someone who's also been with Baltimore since 2017, is having the best year of his career. You then have Ryan O'Hearn, who's having a great year, who the Orioles picked up before the season after he was given up on by the Royals. Aaron Hicks, the outfielder under contract with the Yankees, who's been awful for a few years now and finally released by the team, was then given a shot by Baltimore, and at this point, like clockwork, he has been much better in an Orioles uniform. It's really impressive to see what's going on, and as far as the pitching goes, it just gets even more impressive. Kyle Bradish, one of the players the Orioles got in return from the Angels for Dylan Bundy, well, he's been the ace this season so far, pitching to the lowest ERA in the rotation. Tyler Wells, the Rule 5 pick from the Twins, has also been really good. And overall, it's not necessarily the best and sexiest rotation in baseball, but it's getting the job done enough and handing the ball off to the bullpen. A bullpen that may very well be the best in baseball. The Orioles have 5 relievers who have at least been solid for them in their bullpen, and out of those 5, there are 2 who have been otherworldly in 2023. Yenier Cano, remember him? One of the players the Orioles got in return from the Twins for Jorge Lopez, who had been an incredible closer for Baltimore before being traded. Well, in just his second big league season, this year, Cano became an all-star. In almost 50 innings thrown, Cano has an ERA of about 1.5. He has been awesome. Meanwhile, Jorge Lopez has been nothing but bad since becoming a Twin. After the trade, Lopez pitched to an ERA of about 4.5 to close off 2022, and in 2023, he has an ERA over 5 so far. So Cano's been great, but that's most certainly not all, because then you have arguably the best reliever in baseball right now, Felix Bautista. Felix Bautista signed with the Marlins back in 2012 as an international free agent from the Dominican Republic, was eventually released by the Marlins a few years later, didn't play at all professionally in 2015, and that's when the Orioles decided to give this kid a shot, signing him to a minor league deal and giving him a chance to make his way through their farm system. It took another 6 years and 10 years after signing his original contract with the Marlins, but he finally had made it, making the Orioles' 2022 opening day roster, and he was great. In 65 2/3 innings last year, Bautista pitched to a 2.19 ERA, striking out 88 hitters and recording 15 saves. So heading into 2023, Bautista was definitely a guy to keep an eye out for, and he has since become arguably the best reliever in all of baseball. In 2023, Felix Bautista, who was also named an All-Star alongside his teammate Yenier Cano, has pitched about 50 innings with an ERA under 1 while striking out 96 hitters. That's an average of 17.6 strikeouts per 9 innings. That is absurd, and he currently has the most saves in the American League. Just filthy stuff out of this Oriole bullpen. Almost unfair. And this past weekend, the Orioles went into Tropicana Field down in St. Petersburg, Florida, to attempt to take over the AL East, and they succeeded in that mission, winning 3 out of 4 games and leaving with a 2-game lead in first place over the Rays. The Orioles are for real. They currently have the best record in the American League and the second best record in all of baseball. It's kind of weird to say they've been doing it quietly this whole time, But they kind of have, considering the Rays were in first the entire time. But the Orioles just kept chipping away, doing their thing, winning consistently, and it finally caught up to a Rays team that's been struggling for a bit now. The trade deadline is coming up, and the Orioles could use an arm or two to join the rotation, so it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing and what trades they pull off. But whatever the case is, Orioles fans deserve this. They've been through enough suffering over the last 6+ years. 6+ years of terrible, dreadful, embarrassing baseball, being the laughingstock of the league, a laughingstock that has suddenly turned into the best team in the American League.